They say, show me a woman without shame, and I'll show you a man. Welcome to Shameless Parenting. Welcome back.
Hey, good to be back.
We are very tired.
Yes.
We almost didn't do this session.
I think we're just at that point now where we're 5 weeks in of not having more than 2.5 hours of sleep in a row, and it's starting to catch up with us, that's for sure.
I think we're learning a lot of things about how it works with multiple kids and older kids, right?
Yes, I think you think that like after a year kids sleep through the night, and that's definitely not the case. And in fact, sometimes it's even the older ones, like the 8-year-olds that can be up multiple times a night.
Well, welcome everyone to Shameless Parenting. Today we pretty much have an episode focusing on breastfeeding.
Yes.
And before we dive into that, I just want to encourage everyone, thanks for all the support. Keep sending in the questions. Some of them are hilarious. They make my day. And please subscribe and share with your friends. So I think before we get into the crux and the listener question this week, I wanted to discuss something pretty traumatic that happened to us the other day.
Yeah.
So our daughter, she's been, and this is something that everyone can relate to with parents. Whenever they're in the bath or perhaps in the shower, sometimes there's the dreaded poo.
Yes.
Yeah, the poo in the bathtub, the proverbial poo in the shower. And so this time, our daughter had almost seemed to be making a bit of a habit of pooing in the bath, and we switched to the shower, which we thought would be easier because you'd have to drain the bath.
Because we were still sanitizing the bath.
And, at our house, the bathtub is one of those big spa baths, so it's huge. You have to literally get in the bath and clean it out like a mini pool. So anyway, she was in the shower, which she was loving, but then she laid a log.
Yes. This was day 2 of a log.
Yeah, this was the sequel, the logging. And it was a huge poo, came out like a candle. I got the call, Ryan, poo, and I have to come running with,
it's also something that's not in my domain.
Yeah, I'm the one who has to,
Yes.
to deal with the shit, literally. But this night was a little bit different. And you kind of had a scream and were like, oh my God, there are worms in the poo.
Like literally crawling around in it. I've never felt so sick.
You were almost gagging.
Yeah.
Poor Rosie, she was freaking out.
We tried to compose it pretty quickly to be like, it's okay, there's nothing here, everything's fine.
But on the poo itself, which was huge, by the way, it was like an adult poo, there was probably about 6 thin white pinworms, and they were wriggling around like leeches. It was gruesome, right? And none of the kids have ever had worms before, even though it's super common. Yeah, not that we're examining poo that often.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was very confronting, and we had to kind of deal with that. It's very, very simple to deal with, by the way. If anyone is wondering, it's literally a deworming little piece of chocolate that the kids have, and that's pretty much it.
They love it. Like literally some of the kids were saying, can we have more of that chocolate? Can we have more of that chocolate? Like, no. This is medicine. But also it is apparently so common. You can get it from anywhere. It not necessarily just from a daycare, literally just from playing, on the play equipment. You can get it. So it's from the bottom of your shoes, everywhere. So It is very, very common. And I actually know some people that I now know since that actually deworm every year.
Like a dog.
Like a dog.
It gets dewormed. I just think it's so hard not to feel like you failed as a parent if your kid has worms.
Yes.
It's super common. And the whole family has to be dewormed at the same time because you can pass, I won't go into the gruesome details, but essentially the eggs get laid on the rim of the anus and the kids scratch it under their fingernails and then it goes back into the mouths and they get passed around. And these are microscopic eggs, by the way. You can't even see them. Anyway, for anyone who's still listening because they're not grossed out, it's very easy to deal with. Don't freak out. A little square of chocolate over the counter in your chemist and you are dewormed and good to go.
Definitely. And the sign to look out for, which now in hindsight we know, we did notice with Rose a few days earlier, as if they have an itchy bum. So if they're scratching their bottom, then that's when you can check it out.
Especially at night.
I think we got lucky that we saw the worms in her poo.
Yeah, so it was a stroke of luck actually that she pooed in the shower where I had a good view of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's skip to the question for this week. All right. And
Cool.
this one, this is a good one. So, dear podcast, I've quite the shameless story for you. For context, I've grown up as quite a conservative. Growing up, I have memories of my dad literally getting up and leaving the dinner table when either my mum or my sister would mention anything to do with their periods. So when my breastfeeding wife asked to help her unblock her milk duct the other day, I didn't really react so well. If I'm brutally honest, there is a part of me that is quite squeamish about all the changes her body has gone through. I understand it's all natural and I love my wife, but she now looks so different. I can't help but feeling a little put off. I'm trying not to come to the conclusion that I'm a bad guy. How should I handle this?
So I think you need to be clear for everybody, because a lot of people may not realize when you say help unblock, what exactly are you asking him to do?
You got to drink from the fire hydrant. So basically, I don't know why you're making me tell this, but breastfeeding, you can get your ducts or the places the milk comes out of, it can be blocked, and you can have this thing called mastitis, which is this inflammation, and the breast gets rock hard and red and awful. And one of the ways it's unblocked is the baby feeding on it. Now, if the baby can't feed on it, sometimes another person, usually the husband, will suck manually on the breast and
To unblock
it. But obviously having to get the milk in the process. And this has famously been very comedic, in comedies, and I think a lot of like Judd Apatow has a lot of fun with this in his movies. But it's a real thing. It absolutely is a real thing. And give me your thoughts first before I dive in.
So are you asking my thoughts around whether he should or shouldn't be grossed out, or just the situation in general?
Well, just give me your initial thoughts. Yeah.
So my initial thoughts are that, as someone who has suffered from blocked ducts before, and they can become very, very painful, and it's something you need to get on to relatively quickly. And it is, in my view, a medical emergency. And what would you not do for your partner in an medical emergency?
Man.
If nothing is working, so obviously step one is get the baby on and feed and try and get them to unblock it. If that doesn't work and you have a pump, then pump and try and get that to unblock it. But if those two things don't work, you actually don't have a whole lot of choice. And trust me, a grown man is going to probably have a better chance of being able to suck hard enough in order to unblock the duct compared to your baby. And therefore it is really preventing, if the implications, if that doesn't get unblocked, we're talking about your partner becoming very sick, fevers, needing to go potentially on antibiotics. Like, it's pretty devastating. So part of me is like, you need to man up and you just need to do it.
This is probably the ultimate man up territory, right? Like and it's one of those, I kind of have sympathy for what this man is going through, because things just switch so rapidly, right? Like, the breasts are a sexual part of the body, and is obviously a fan favorite for a lot of men. But suddenly there's this weird switch, there's this inflection, and they're not for you anymore. And in fact, they're full of milk, and it's all, you don't know how to respond. Now, I'll admit, I have had to man up once.
We have had such medical emergency happen to us before.
We were in Byron Bay. So I think what happens in Byron Bay stays in Byron Bay. When you have that raw kefir milk, you just trying it. You're just experimenting in Byron Bay, right? It's the right place for it. We're on holidays, and you had the block duck, and I had to step up to the plate.
Yes, which you did.
Which I did, and it's quite the experience.
But honestly, the relief once it was unblocked was amazing. And my first thought was, I'm just going to do this the first time. I'm just going to do this the first time next time. This was so much more efficient. I
don't want to turn this story of this man into my story of unblocking the duck, because it could get quite graphic. But look, okay, let's we've established that it's important, and sometimes it's a bit of a medical emergency. But in parts of his other question, I want to respond to it because he's kind of trying to work out, is he a bad guy? And he's having these feelings that he's admitting, but he loves his wife and he doesn't want to make her feel bad or anything like that. I just kind of think like, also, if you're not a pepperoni man, you're not a pepperoni man. Like, you can't force yourself to like it. And there are so many changes that the breast goes through. It's I've got sympathy for that, right? Like, you got to do the act, you got to man up and do it. But at the same time, I think there's something in admitting that, okay, look, that if you're squeamish about it, you're squeamish. It's like that fainting thing that we spoke about, right? Like, how can you change that? And how can that be held against you, that you prefer your wife's body a different way or whatever? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, and the body will continue to change as well, right? The way it is now is not going to be the way it's going to be when you finish breastfeeding, et cetera, as well. I mean, it's not like when we had this situation that you were like, yeah, absolutely, I've been waiting my whole life for this opportunity. Like, you weren't exactly thrilled at the idea, but you did it.
I did it. No, okay. Look, let me break it down in a bit more of a upfront way. You would be lying to say as a man that there aren't changes going on that take you a little bit further away from sexual attraction. But that doesn't mean they take you towards like a disgust or kind of squeamish. That is more just what you are conditioned to feel. The weird spot that for me is that there's also this added element of play. And I've said this to you where, like, if you get hit with, do you still find me sexy or whatever, or, there are certain things about the lactating breasts and the kind of postpartum body that you almost feel like you be a deviant finding sexy.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's almost like it's inappropriate for you to get turned on by these things. And there are reasons for that in nature, but also just socially. You don't want to be some weird creep that is like, is there anything more perverted and creepy than a man who somehow has a fetish for breast milk?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
do you know what I mean? So I think that there's a lot of things making it hard for, I think, men to fully engage. Now, no one wants to hurt their partner, but I think on the other end, you don't want to lie and be like, oh yeah, I almost love your breasts more now. It's like, no, that's not what she wants to hear. And my guidance to this man is just keep most of it to yourself. I think because this is also a temporary thing, right? And I don't think you need to feel like you're a bad person if you prefer your wife's body before kids. But you also just have to be realistic and supportive, I think. And, as you guys get back together and go through the healing process together.
Yeah. And I think that she knows that, and she's probably feeling that too, about the same things as well.
Yeah. Now, just as a bonus point, if this man does man up and gets on that titty and drinks from the fire hydrant, do you think that he has a duty to swallow, or can he spit it out?
It's up to him. Either is fine. There's plenty of people. I can totally understand why you'd want to spit that out, but there's plenty of people that pay a lot of money for breast milk to drink.
Perverts.
Yeah.
Perverts and bodybuilders.
And I also think there's plenty of people that would have a bit of an, intrigue into like, what does it actually taste like as well?
Well, this is an interesting dinner time conversation to have with people, right? A dinner party conversation with other parents, of course, not single. That's a good way to get rid of the single person in the room. Start talking about whether you've tasted your wife's breast milk. But when you do bring that up, it's a really wide range of results. I'm going to hit the street and find out now. But we know a couple who are like, almost incredulous that people aren't curious and that they don't try it.
I know. For me personally, I have never had any desire to try it. I have never tried it. I don't know why. It's just like something that I've just never really wanted to do. But then I have had other friends that have said, what are you talking about? Like, how have you not tried it? Like, your baby is literally drinking that. Why would you not want to know what that tastes like? And obviously it's fine to drink something that literally your baby, one of the most precious things in the world, is drinking, which is fair enough too.
That's a good point there. One time my friend Dave came over and I made him a flat white with some of yours. So to this day, he still doesn't know.
Sorry, Dave.
Oh, man. All right. So again, I don't think you're a bad guy. I think that you can't help sometimes feeling squeamish, especially you've given that weird semi-Catholic upbringing where you've got issues around the female form and periods and things like that. And again, I put that in the same category. Like, it'd be nice not to shame and make women feel bad about periods and things. But at the same time, like, you don't have to pretend that you love them, right? Like, that's unnatural.
No, but I do think like on that part around leaving the table and this and that, like it is important to be able to talk about these things and normalize them for women. I think we talk about a lot of this stuff in a very normal way. Like it's very normal for you to go buy me, pads and tampons and things like that and not feel awkward, about that and stuff too. And I think that's really important.
I feel less awkward than you do.
Yeah.
I feel sometimes. Maybe that's a shameless thing.
Yeah, maybe.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about breastfeeding. I want to kind of give a quick segment before we do our best and worst for products, right? Because I think that breastfeeding is something that is so important, yet so divisive, and is a source of so much stress on new mothers, right?
Yes.
And I want to ask you to kind of give a flavor of, how it's been and what are the challenges with it. Like, what does breastfeeding mean for you? Because I know it's a bit of a tortured relationship. And when you talk to people, it's definitely on that top 3 of things that almost break you as a new mother.
Yeah, definitely. And in fact, I mean, I remember one friend many years ago before I was close to having children, so I had no idea, said to me after she gave birth to her daughter that if I had known how hard breastfeeding was going to be, I wouldn't have done it and I wouldn't have started. And at the time I was really shocked by that, but now I completely understand. I would say that it is the hardest thing to for many people, for many women, and I would say there's probably not one woman that I know that hasn't had challenges, and everyone's journey with breastfeeding is so different, and everyone has different approaches. So we're not going to, I think, today get into a conversation around breastfeeding versus formula and blah blah. That in itself I think is its whole different,
it's part of the
topic.
divisiveness though.
It is whole kind of different topic, but I think most people when they give birth will at least attempt to breastfeed and at least have a period of time, usually at least the first kind of 6 weeks to 3 months, that they're going to kind of at least try to make it work. It is extremely painful. So some advice that I got from a friend who gave birth about 6 months before I gave birth was, no matter how good that latch is and how perfect that latch is, you are told that if you're doing it right, it shouldn't be painful, but it will be painful. And the first time that you start to breastfeed, it is very painful. And you kind of go through this stage where it's really painful at the start and you're just trying to, especially before your milk comes in, I actually think it's really important that you are focused on really protecting your nipples and keeping your nipples really, really healthy, because if you start to get cuts and so forth on them, that can happen very easily. I had problems with that. It can be very hard to recover from that. And then when your milk comes in, you're not in a very good position to, to really start getting going with breastfeeding. So it is very, very painful. I remember with Rose, I was just taking, one of the reasons I stayed on Panadol and kept taking Panadol for so long was actually more because of breastfeeding than actually the recovery from birth itself.
It's the dreading of the pain as well, right? Like the knowing that all your newborn baby wants is to feed. It's how they soothe, it's how they sleep, it's how they grow. But pain's coming, and it'll come again, and
it does get better. So it is something you have to mentally just push through and push through and push through. Then what will happen is that you'll find that it will be painful for the first 20 seconds, and then it suddenly, once that letdown happens and things relax, it's suddenly not painful anymore. So you get through this next stage where once you've got through that first stage of the initial painfulness, you get through the second stage of painfulness, which in my mind, I remember I would just have to count to 20 and I just go, 20, 20. Okay, now it's not painful anymore. And then eventually you get to a stage where it isn't painful anymore. Now that was my personal journey with breastfeeding. Obviously everyone's is different.
Threshold for pains are different.
Exactly. But that's what I found. And I would say on average, I think is quite typical for most women that I know that I've kind of talked through that have started to breastfeed. Yeah.
No, thanks for sharing that. And I think I don't want to go into a big, a big kind of grandstand around the formula and breastfeed. We'll save that maybe for another discussion. But I will share a story that actually I heard that goes to show how much pressure is put around breastfeeding. And this is something, again, a trap that we all fall into. But I know this one of my friends who was giving birth at the hospital, and they were sharing a room, and there was this mother in the adjoining kind of bed, and she had breast implants, and so essentially the baby was struggling to latch on because it was very tight, right? So the skin was pulled a bit tighter than someone who had natural breasts, and the amount of abuse and criticism that she was getting from the midwives was shocking. And I think that on the whole, midwives are incredible, but there is this pressure, this undeniable pressure about breastfeeding, right? And from a time where women already feel very vulnerable and very kind of like out of their depth as new mothers, it doesn't help.
Yeah.
It really doesn't help. And my message to men on this thing is brief. It's two things: nutrition, trying to make sure that your partners have good liquids, good food during this period is really, really important. And the second is just kind of to acknowledge the sacrifice. It seems on the outside as a man the most natural thing in the world, and almost almost automatic, right? They just whip out the breast and everything happens and it's all fine. But really, it is a big sacrifice. The giving up your time to make sure that the baby's getting the best start in life, the pain, the perseverance, and I think that is not always portrayed very well by men, and it's just to be appreciative of the sacrifice for your child. So.
Yeah. Just think mentally, especially in those early days. And we say early days, we're saying, the first couple of months, mentally every at least 2 hours, sometimes more frequently than that, sometimes maybe if you're lucky a little bit more than that, you are having to keep putting a baby on and putting a baby on and putting a baby on onto your breast, knowing that that's going to be excruciating pain. Now, I don't want to scare people away from breastfeeding because it's something that you can get through, and there are lots of tools out there to help support get through that, which we can obviously kind of talk about, absolutely. But I do think it's really important to go into it being very aware of it so that you can be prepared. And I think that doing things like breastfeeding classes, using lactation consultants, there's lots of products out there that can really help manage the pain and the health of your nipples and so forth in between feedings and so forth. That's gonna help. But I think it's important we all acknowledge that so that you don't go into this thinking it's something that's going to be really easy, because a lot of people don't realize.
Yeah. Okay, well, talking about being prepared, let's talk about our best and worst when it comes to breastfeeding.
Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome.
Do you want to go first with your best?
Okay, so I have a best that I had already thought about talking about, but now given where the conversation is going, I might actually mention a couple of other things, if you don't mind, of products and so forth that I think actually help, because there is so much, I think, obviously kind of in the space. So my best that I was actually going to talk about was going to be getting a properly fitted maternity bra.
Oh, yeah.
Which I didn't do for probably the first 12 months and regretted it. So obviously there are lots of maternity bras out there. I've used lots of different brands. The Bonds ones, for example, I found were pretty good, etc. as well. They were great and did the job, but I actually went in and got properly fitted through bras and things, but there are obviously lots of other places. And actually, you forget, I haven't been properly fitted for a bra since I was probably 14 or 15 with my mother and Maya getting fitted for a bra, which every, I think, woman has
was it the same bra
memory of a memory of the first time you're buying a bra with your mother and you get, properly fitted by these women. I think that's how long it's been. And actually the support that you get and the fit that you get has made a huge difference. So spending the time to do that would be kind of my best.
Awesome. What's the profile of just talk me through really quickly, what do they do? Do they just kind of like a tailor get the measuring tape out, or do they go in for the cup?
They look at you, like they will pick out a few different things in different sizes and breast sizes, and they're obviously thinking about the fact that it can be a bit complicated when you're breastfeeding because your breasts change sizes all the time, and the size that they are when you first start breastfeeding is not going to be the size that they are 6 months later, etc. And same with your size. So they're thinking about the changes that are coming too as well, and they'll look at you in the bra and all that kind of stuff as well.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go to my best, and I have kind of two just because one of them is probably not going to hit the mark for everyone. But the first one that my best I would recommend is prenatal expressing, right? And again, this is something that works best with a partner. I mean, let's be honest, parenting works best with a partner, but prenatal expressing is something that we've found to be very, very useful. And what it is essentially is in the lead up, I think it's 37...
From 37 weeks.
From 37 weeks, right? Just before you give birth, there's colostrum inside, right? Inside the breast, which is this reduced hyperconcentrated form of the milk. And what you can do is essentially massage it out while your partner, in my case, has a little syringe, and you kind of like sucking up these little droplets of liquid gold. And you keep as many as you can to take in with you. And what you find is that it can relieve supply issues when the milk comes in. So you've got these little vials of liquid gold that you've harvested, right? And you can just inject it into your baby's mouth to give them that top up when they're born, while you're waiting for things to get into the rhythm. So I thought that was amazing, and it's a good bonding thing too. I think it's like hilarious. You're there with like a little tiny syringe, trying not to waste these precious droplets of gold. It's funny. It's just I think it's a good bonding thing too.
It will also blow your mind as a woman when it's your first pregnancy, that first time that you actually squeeze your breast and something comes out, it kind of blows your mind because you're like, oh my God, this is happening, that my breasts actually do have some milk.
Yeah, they're not just ornamental anymore.
Yeah, this is why they grew so big. But I would also think of that as an insurance policy.
Yeah.
So best case scenario is you don't need to use them. And if that happens, that's totally fine. But I think in our experience, especially with my first pregnancy, in those first kind of 48 hours, it was a game changer when you've got sore, cracked nipples, being able to have some relief before, your milk comes in. It was huge.
And it can be the difference between having to go to formula or not, right? Which is not necessarily the end of the world, but it can be important to a lot of people mentally. Just tying that over, or giving your, because it'd be fair to say that when in the early days is a kind of like an arms race between how quickly your breast will heal versus how much you need to feed, right? So it's kind of almost healing just in time for the next feed or whatever it is. So that can give you that little break. The one, if you're not down with that whole thing, the other thing is just, I would say, nipple shields, right? Like I think that most people you talk to have this story of almost giving up because their nipples in ruins and bleeding, chapped, whatever. And then you put on one of those shields, which essentially is like a silicone protector with, holes for the milk to come out. And it's like amazing.
Yeah.
It gives them that relief. It extends the nipples so the baby can get it more in their mouth because their mouths are so small. I think that they are responsible for saving mothers from giving up breastfeeding in the early days.
And you know what? Even my own mother told me, so I used a nipple shield, especially on one side. With both pregnancies, I had issues on one side, and this nipple shield absolutely got me through that really painful kind of period and just helped provide that relief. And then my mum actually said the same thing to me, that when she was breastfeeding the first time, again, exact same experience, really painful, really struggling, etc. One of the midwives told her about a nipple shield, and she said if it wasn't for that, she would have given up. So that was my mum, who 30 years ago was, obviously trying to breastfeed and everything for the first time, and that's when these things were talked about even less.
She should have gifted you the original the original shield.
But yeah, definitely. I was thinking about both the colostrum and the nipple shield were the two other things that I was thinking about as well. So yeah,
it's almost like we've gone through this together.
Yeah, great minds. And lanolin as well.
Yeah, that stuff is magic.
It's really good to help, and actually it's really nice for even cracked lips and stuff as well. I put a little bit on cracked lips too.
Oh, I don't know how to feel about that.
Yeah, but but can help with that healing in between feeds as well.
It is magic cream. So lanolin cream is a specific kind of herbal healing cream in a little tube. So get some of that. Let's go for worst.
Okay, so my worst that I'm going to say is reusable breastfeeding pads. They're like cotton pads that you put in your bra to soak up the milk, and there are reusable ones and there are also disposable ones. And I just think the reusable ones personally just don't work. I think that they don't soak up enough milk. They're a pain because you have to wash them all the time. I understand the environmental impacts, but I think similar to like having a pad with your period, I just don't think that they are worth the effort or actually particularly effective compared to disposable ones, which I actually think are much more effective at capturing milk and helping you feel dry throughout the day when you're breastfeeding. So that's my worst.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, no one's got time for that.
No.
These tiny little, I remember when I saw them, they never dry very well. Yeah, anyway.
They're always deformed after they dry.
Okay, my worst is I'm going to have to go with the inconsistency or the cryptic message of breastfeeding in general from medical professionals. And probably this shade is directed more squarely at lactation consultants. Now, I know that many people who have had a lot of good experiences with lactation consultants, but my beef is that it varies so much and often within the same hospital. And there's something that is common feedback that all the midwives and nurses lactation, they always seem to have their way is the right way and everyone else is doing it wrong. But somehow they're not just getting in the staff room and talking about like, how do we create a clear message for everyone? And I just think it's like, you don't need that confusion or the kind of conflicting information at that time when you're trying to be a good student. And I must say too, that most of my previous comments about how evangelical or how judgmental people are, I feel like lactation consultants are the apex for that kind of behavior. You know, they're these kind of ultra weird, hippie, specialized nurses, and I just think it lands wrong. Maybe it lands better with women, but listening my brief experience and the stories I hear, I think that they need to have a relook at that.
Yeah. It's a good one.
All right, I think we've cleared it today. I mean, it's a big topic, a lopsided topic. But yeah, it's just want to sign off and say I'm very grateful for all your duty to the kids.
Oh, thank you. I hope we haven't scared anyone around breastfeeding. It is an absolute amazing, beautiful thing, you know, if you can make it work. But if not, at the end of the day, a fed baby is the most important thing, whichever way that happens. And but I think some of the things we talked about, if you do want to focus on breastfeeding or have any challenges, I think some things we talked about today, 100% will definitely be able to help you with that journey.
See you next time.
Bye.